let's jump right into this explainer. You know, when most of us load into Mobile Legends and see Moskov, we just picture this totally ruthless marksman, right? Just darting across the map, hurling spears out of the shadows. But he wasn't always this monster. Actually, he was forged by profound grief and some seriously ancient desert darkness. Today, we're gonna completely flip how you look at him, walking through his origins, his brutal downfall, and his really dark rebirth. So think about it. What happens when a hero loses absolutely everything, and literally the only hand reaching out to pull him up is offering revenge? We really need to drop the simple villain narrative here. Moskov is the definition of a fallen hero. He was a guy whose immense pride and agonizing pain just left him incredibly vulnerable. He shows us exactly what happens when you weaponize raw grief. And honestly, that makes his story so much more fascinating than just, another bad guy doing bad things. Now, to actually get Moskov, we have to look at the brutal world that made him, the Agelta Drylands. This is this unforgiving desert region out near the Emerald Road, where just surviving the day is a massive test of strength. The sun shows zero mercy, and the wind wipes away your footprints in seconds. Out here, clans are fighting tooth and nail over water, shelter, and legacy. Your name isn't protected by thick walls or comfy castles, it's protected by sheer courage. Be weak, and the sand just swallows you whole. And the craziest part? Beneath all that unforgiving sand, there are ancient buried secrets just waiting to be dug up. And right into the middle of this harsh world, Moskov is born, but not just as another survivor. He was the prince of the Wildsand Clan. Talk about pressure, right? From day one, he carried the crushing weight of his entire people's expectations. Lead the clan, fight the battles, be the unbreakable shield. Every single strike of his spear carried the hopes of his tribe. But Moskov? Well, he was driven by this massive, consuming pride. He didn't just want to scrape by, he wanted his clan to be literal legends. And it's super important to note here, he wasn't weak, he wasn't a coward. Ironically, it was having way too much trapped pride that caused his ultimate downfall. He just needed his name to matter. You really see the tragedy of Moskov when you put him side by side with another huge desert figure, Khaleed. These two actually shared this tight brotherhood that eventually twisted into a really bitter rivalry. It's wild because the exact same desert shaped them in completely opposite ways. You look at Khaleed, and he's just got this natural leadership and charisma. People gravitated to him. He became this symbol of unity and hope. But then you have Moskov, intense, constantly demanding recognition through sheer force of will. While Khaleed inspired people, Moskov kind of morphed into a symbol of wounded pride and rage. He wasn't evil, he was just deeply insecure and incredibly hungry to prove himself while standing in Khaleed's rising shadow. But then, the fragile peace of the Drylands just completely shatters. War hits the region like a violent sandstorm. Suddenly, clans are clashing, and folks who used to share the same roads and markets are now bitter enemies. These old, buried grudges just explode into widespread bloodshed, turning the desert into a massive graveyard of ambition. And right at the dead center of this chaos, the Wildsand Clan is staring down total destruction. Moskov fought like crazy, refusing to run, standing tall as their prince. But man, courage alone just wasn't enough. The battle totally turned against them. The speed at which Moskov's destiny collapses is just terrifying. In just 1 month, war completely swallows the Drylands. Then, in a mere 7 days, the mighty Wildsand Clan is utterly overwhelmed. Moskov is forced to stand there and watch his people, his entire future, just fall apart in front of him. And finally, in the span of a single hour, his own physical strength gives out. He falls, wounded, bleeding out right onto the very sand he swore to protect. Everything he fought for, the whole legacy of his clan, just crushed. Just picture the sheer cinematic tension of this moment. The battle's over. The scorching sun is beating down on broken weapons and fallen warriors. And there's Moskov, the proud prince, lying mortally wounded. But his pride, it refuses to surrender. He absolutely cannot accept being forgotten. The battlefield, though, doesn't care about his pride. His physical body gives out, and he dies right there in the sand. But this is where things take a really dark turn. His physical life is over, sure, but his emotional state absolutely refuses to let go. That burning humiliation, the profound sense of failure, his towering, unadulterated rage, it all completely outlasts his mortal body. He doesn't die with peaceful acceptance. His soul is literally on fire, desperate to strike back. And because that hatred is screaming so loudly, something actually hears him. Far beneath the blood-soaked battlefield,
Buried incredibly deep under the Agelta sand, an ancient, sinister evil tunes into his final raging thoughts. The darkness actually answers his call.
So what exactly was on the other end of that call? It was the Great Vortex of Darkness. We're talking about an ancient force buried for centuries, silently feeding off generations of war, bloodshed, and deep-seated resentment. And the most terrifying thing about this vortex is that it completely understands human pain. It doesn't force Moscow to do anything. It just holds up a mirror to what he already feels: the intense humiliation, the crushing loss of his clan. It doesn't offer him comfort, it offers him pure revenge. The darkness didn't invent Moscow's pain, it just perfectly exploited the anger that was already boiling over. And we definitely can't talk about this dark force without bringing up Khufra's shadow. Khufra is this ancient desert tyrant intricately tied to this cycle of destruction out here. And this right here is the true tragedy of the Explainer. See, Moskov genuinely believes he is actively choosing vengeance. He thinks he's honoring his people. But in reality, he's just becoming a weapon inside a much, much older historical curse. He thinks he's taking the wheel, but he's literally just a pawn being manipulated by an evil that poisoned these sands long before he was even born. Just listen to the sinister bargain this vortex offers him. It whispers, "Your people are gone. Your pride is shattered. Take this spear and silence the desert." I mean, wow. It gives this terrifying voice to the darkness that's completely consuming the prince. Notice how it doesn't offer to bring his people back. It just hands him the tools to punish the world that took them. And with his hatred completely overriding his judgment, Moskov takes the deal. The prince of the Wildsand Clan dies for good right then and there, and something entirely different takes his place. He officially becomes the Spear of Quiescence. Now, if you look up the word quiescence, it means a state of absolute stillness, quietness, or silence, and that perfectly captures this massive shift in his identity. He goes from being this loud, warring prince who desperately demanded the world remember his name, into this cold, ghost-like killer whose only goal is to bring the dead silence of the grave to his enemies. This rebirth changes him forever. He is ice cold and totally ruthless. His body is literally carrying darkness, and his heart is just filled with revenge. And I absolutely love how this directly ties into his gameplay and Mobile Legends. If you've ever played him or faced off against him, you know his basic attacks physically pierce straight through enemies. That perfectly symbolizes his unstoppable grief. His revenge doesn't just stop at one target, it violently passes through them, like a ghost of war haunting the desert. To really grasp the weight of this tragedy, just look at who he used to be versus what he is now. The prince, he fought for honor, he protected his clan, and he actively worked to build a future. But the ghost he turned into, he fights exclusively for revenge. His clan is extinct, meaning there's literally no one left to protect. He isn't looking for a future anymore. His entire existence is dedicated to punishing the past. The old Moskov fought to build things up. The reborn Moskov fights solely to tear everything down. Which brings us to a final thought here. Will Moskov's endless quest for revenge ever actually give him the peace he's craving? Or is he just forever trapped, a prisoner to the desert's ancient darkness? Because the real trap of revenge is that it promises you an ending, but usually it just builds you a prison. He got his power, sure, but he traded away his freedom. As he stalks the sands as the Spear of Quiescence, you really have to wonder if he'll ever silence his inner demons, or if he's doomed to be a tragic pawn forever. Definitely something to think about next time you see him locking onto you in the game. Thanks for hanging out with me for this explainer, and I'll catch you in the next one.